The manga starts, and the first thing that we hear is the mutters and laughs of the people who made Takashi's living a brutal hell from which he can never escape from. As a group of trash kick and step on him, they made sure to enjoy every single second of this. The length of the bullies didn't end here. It stretched into a cycle of abyss filled with malice and darkness. From day one, his existence was marked, and he got bullied over and over again. No matter how much he tried to get out, in the end, he would always fall into the hands of the trash. Now, instead of standing up for their classmate, the whole class was the main culprit as well, and they began to first ignore this and slowly began to take pleasure from watching their dark fantasy come to life. This is the brutal story of how Takashi, a pig-faced student with nothing to his name. Takashi is an orphan, and to make things worse, he had a sister, which is the reason for his silence and endurance. As a bully throws a mix of food, filled with pubic hair, all of the other students quickly brought out their stupid mobiles and began to take videos. As we see Takashi, who questions something, the entire class got up on their feet and began to instruct him to devour the mixture they all prepared for him. Takashi is the pig of the class, and it is his job to take care of the demands of his classmates. Ryuk hits his head hard after he tries to sneak his way out, and with a cold voice, he tells him to eat it or they would kill him. He began to bleed from his nose, and all the classmates began to laugh at him. A pretty girl approaches and tells him that she herself mixed some of her stuff in the mixture, and he should happily eat this. As the whole class began to sing the same phrase over and over again, Ryuk sits down, and with a threatening tone, he lets him know that if he does not eat this and embraces this here, he would really have to do something unthinkable today to compensate for this. Now Takashi was at a stage that he knew he could not run away, and in the first place, some people never have such privilege. He lowers his head, and as he trembled, he ate the gross mixture filled with hairs and all sorts of disgusting things. Just as he did this, the whole class began to laugh at the top of their lungs, and they shouted to each other that the pig has finally shown his real colors and habits. Tears overflowed, and he cried for just falling so low, and poor Takashi is in such a state, and no one really likes to step in for him anymore. One of his trash classmates smiles at the picture he took and proposes that they should take a picture to remember the day when there was a pig in their class. As Ryuk manhandled that poor soul, all the classmates laughed and took a picture, whereas Takashi was lowering his head like a slave and an animal. This was the hell that he shared with us, and cried that sometimes these pieces of trash only remembered his name when they wanted to hurt him. He was so absent of happiness that he really wanted to just disappear somewhere and live a normal life for once in his life, away from all the misery, all the aggressive students, all the bullies, and all the people who sit in the back laugh and then gossip for ages. As the rest of the group had a great time, it seemed like they created such an atmosphere for themselves that they were spared of all the bullying. That day Takashi was about to end everything, and every step of his journey was a blessing. He cried out that he has reached his limit, and says to himself that it is better this way for all. As the train approached, that was the very last thing Takashi saw. That day he was supposed to die, but he instead was teleported to another world. As Takashi stabs a fish in a river, we see him all healthy, smiling, and happy from the bottom of his heart. He gets out of the river and tosses the fish in the bag in which he had other fishes, and as he lays down, he breathes the fresh air which refreshed his mood, and he smiles and thanks for everything. The fresh morning rays of the sun fall on his face, and he could not be more happy. Now he was resting, but from the back, two orcs with big weapons approached him, ready to kill him. They had big muscles, and blood covered some parts of their bodies. Immediately Takashi panics, and the horrifying orcs say something. Instead of attacking or killing him, he smiles and asks if it is time for dinner already. He gets up, and the orcs nodded their head. Takashi definitely died back then. He was transported to a land filled with orcs. When he saw their threatening-looking faces, they glared through his soul, and he was sure that they would kill him, but instead, they welcomed him to their homes. Back to the present, as he got back to the orc village, a baby orc runs towards him and hugs him. At first, he was scared that these monsters would have killed him, but they accepted him. As a cute little kid showed him a rock, he asks if the orc had drawn this for him, and he lets out a cute voice. Takashi's life had finally changed for the best. Everyone around him are different from the people he encountered earlier in his life. Here he could laugh all he wants, dance all he wants, and do whatever he would like. Every day fills him with the same thought of appreciating the things that matter and give peace. With peace, he also has a secret crush on an elf who visits him most of the time, the pretty Care. As she greets him, he reflects to himself that he loves to talk to her every day. As she waves and smiles, his heart could not help but flutter seeing her face. He could not help himself, and this time, he decided to give her a token of appreciation for everything that she did for him, from hanging out with him and other things. As he gives her a necklace, she hugs him, and that day something very sad was just around the corner. As he sends her off, a few days passed, and his life changed once again when he returned to the orc village only to see the most agonizing and soul-crushing sight ahead. Bodies laid all around the places, and all the orcs who greeted him and fed him were twisted around and torn into thousands of pieces. As the cracking sound from the fire made it impossible for him to process this, all the people he once knew were torn into pieces, and the entire village was slaughtered. The people who were doing this didn't spare anything, no kids or women. He looks ahead of him and sees 3 pieces of trash, complaining about how the organs and intestines of orcs are all over the place. They laughed it off, and these were the exact pieces of trash who made him do the unthinkable back on Earth. For a minute, Takashi just couldn't believe this, and then Ryuk ends up seeing him, and immediately he recognizes him. As they approach him, he asks how they are here in this world, and they reply that the teleportation incident that happened to him happened to all of his classmates as well. Now all the chatter disappears, when one of the classmates shows him a head of a slain orc, and mockingly he asks him if he was living with these pigs all this time. Nori laughs and mutters how a pig can only live with a pig, and the others laughed with him. As the red thick blood fell from the back, 2 orcs who were hiding sneaked up on them, ready to kill, and Ryuk makes a pose, and in the next second, his hand shines, and energy overflows, and right there he swings at them, and he cuts those 2 so quickly that they immediately dissolve into a few chunks of meat, and clean cuts were visible throughout their bodies. Ryuk puts his foot on the head of the pigs and cries on how orcs are the most easy monsters to slay. Kamada laughs as well and points on how they are stupid and can't even have an ounce of intelligence. All 3 of them were not really aware that these orcs were all his second family, and they asked if he has any special skills or something. They mockingly decided to check his status and skill, and Ryuk mutters search, and immediately the details of his skills became visible only to him. Since Takashi never really killed anyone or hunted any monster, his level was 0, and moreover, there was no skill registered. This just made them have the best laugh of their lifespan, and they cried on how pathetic of a person he can really get. Ryuk shared that when they got there, they met a goddess who gave them blessings and jewels which helped them all to display their skills in a more practical way. He flexes his jewel, and while they were busy pointing out how even the goddess didn't want to see his face, he was busy thinking if goddess and jewels were also something that he needed to go through. He kept staring at them, and he ends up seeing his necklace that he gave to his crush. As he noticed, there were other necklaces as well. He shouts at Ryuk and tells him that the necklaces belong to Care. They glance at him and asked if he knows some elves or something, and they shared that yesterday they were out hunting elves. He stutters and asks what they are talking about, and they told his poor innocent soul that they were hunting, or more specifically, they were hunting down women. He makes a face of an offender who should be sentenced to the most gruesome British punishment, and it was clear that he did something very, very painful to those poor souls. Nori, ugly trash, began to dance around and spewed on how the bodies of elves just made it impossible for them to ignore, and Ryuk looks at Care's necklace, and Takashi was worried to death. He makes a disgusting face again, and tells him that the girl who owned this necklace was a fine woman who ended up doing something to herself, but they still were able to do their jobs with her lifeless body. As they all shared the gruesome and devilish things they did to those elf girls, Takashi knew that they are the worst of the worst. As they talked about how they did themselves on the lifeless body, these pieces of trash did the unthinkable. Ryuk shares to him that he had to kill her since she became very aggressive when he took this necklace from her, and as he licks the necklace, this trash really took everything from Takashi. He cried like a broken man, and they asked if he wanted to join with them as well, or perhaps he had a crush on that girl or something. As he snapped, his humanity was crushed after realizing that if a person endures, the torture never stops. He clenches his fist tight and dashes at them. He screamed at the top of his lungs, and tears almost blinded everything for him. But since he was up against magic, he obviously had no way of fighting them. Kamada casts a spell on his jewel and uses his signature move, Magic Walk, and instantly closes the gap between Takashi and him, and in the next second, he kicks him, and they made their circle once more and trapped him. Ryuk reminded him that it is time for his old punishment. Over on a nearby cliff, they cornered him, and it was clear that after they beat him to a pulp, they were there to push him off the tall cliff. He panted for air, and Ryuk tells him to now jump off the cliff. The stupid ritual of repeating the same phrase began, and with a weak voice, he asked them something. They questioned what the hell he was spewing, and in a cracking and sad voice, he asks why would someone want to hurt and kill someone in the way they brag about. Ryuk, hearing this, began to kick him and shouted at him for thinking that he can live a normal life. He made a gut-wrenching face and told him that for them, he is like an insect that no one would want to be around. For him, Takashi was a son and offspring of a pest that, frankly, anyone would want to smash and crush and kill. They mocked him and told him that in this world there is no concept of police, and no one can stop them from doing the horrible things they always imagined doing back on Earth. Now from their words, it was clear that they were already done, and they were the reincarnation of demons. Fly were the constant chants, and they were pushing him mentally to jump. He instead glares at them with hateful and hurtful eyes full of boiling and uncontained anger, and he lets them know that they won't get away with this. His stare was so petrifying that he knew that he has already left humanity behind. Ryuk was bored now, and as he muttered these words to him, he kicked him, and Takashi fell to his death. Down in the depths of the woods, he grunts and gets up and realizes that he was saved because of the branches which acted as a cushion for his fall. He gets up with bruises all over his body and slowly makes his way to the orc village, which was absolutely trashed. The smell of burning bodies was terrible, and the weeping of giants was even more. All of the monsters hugged their loved ones, and fire surrounded them. Takashi asks if there are anyone else left, and one of the orcs was crying after losing his wife and children, and as Takashi stares at the body, the poor little kid that we saw earlier was also there, and he died due to suffocation caused by his mother, who died protecting him from a sword and slashes. As he looks at this sight, there were no words to explain, and he remembers all the happy monsters in his life, which were taken from him by the same trash who killed his humanity on Earth. He screams in boiling rage and began to punch the ground. He questioned his existence and the limits and ideas of letting someone hurt you. He asks if he is made to be hurt and pushed around. The idea of the forgiveness was over for him, and he didn't care about anything else at this moment. His cries were heard all over the place, and the orcs themselves began to smash their heads around the walls, taking out their rage and anger. They teared up and cried for their loved ones killed in cold blood and misery. Takashi gets up and threw away the useless concept of forgiveness. This time, it was time for revenge. He calls out to his family and shouts at them that if they were done wrong, then they have all the right to avenge themselves and their loved ones. He chanted revenge over and over again and united the remaining army. His words made them understand that there is someone ready to fight back just like they want. As they chanted that day, an army so dangerous came to life that the entire kingdom was about to shake. On the other side, Ryuk and their whole group decided to stay in the forest for the night, and they were pleasuring themselves with whatever they found. Ryuk was doing something terrible, and as the other person cried in pain and agony, the other two watched and waited for their turns. Just then their death was waiting for them, and Takashi was looking at every action of theirs, and behind him were all the remaining orcs. Ryuk leaves the broken girl and cried how it is refreshing to spend time with a human girl, and the three girls cried in fear, knowing that they would die the moment they would run. Nori added his own stupid commentary, and Kamada gets up to relieve himself as well. Ryuk tells them to not hurt or bruise the body, or they would sell for less, but things were just about to turn dark. As he was about to approach the girl, Takashi was sure that everyone except Kamada had taken off their magic enhancer. He signals the orcs, and slowly they began to circle them. Nori was the last person to take off his jewel, and as he chose girls, Takashi raises his hand, and in the next second, the orcs throw bags filled with oil. Now they all had no idea of this, and when the bags of oil exploded after coming in contact with the ground, slowly the ground lit on fire. All of them immediately panicked and began to cry about the intense heat and fire which spread out of nowhere. Kamada and everyone else burned some parts of their bodies and cried. The next wave that the orcs tossed were hard and heavy stones weighing around a few dozen pounds, and as it fell on them all, each blow broke some part of their bones. They guarded themselves, but the stones were penetrating and leaving intense pain and bruises. As it showered stones, the girls themselves sneaked away, and after the round finished, they suddenly became men and shouted at the person throwing stones, and yelled at them to be a man and show his face. Takashi began to mock their existence and laughed on how they rolled like bugs on the ground when their real face was revealed. They screamed and asked him how he survived and if he is even there, and in the next second, the second wave of stones began, and this time, more stones poured on them in a much more ruthless way. Now Ryuk was clever, so he immediately rushed to grab his jewel, but Takashi knew that they would try this, so most of the stones were aimed at him, and one of the stones hit right near his nape, and he falls unconscious. As he fell, the stones kept hitting his body, damaging whatever they struck with. As the orcs approached them, they knew that they were surrounded, and Takashi runs away. Immediately, Kamada was blinded by anger and dashed towards him using his magic skill. He perfectly dashes and makes his way in front of Takashi, ready to punch his teeth out, but in the next second, several stabbing sounds come from the back, and his back began to feel warm. 4 sharp spears lodged inside his body from the back, and several orcs were present there to do justice. He screamed from the excruciating pain, and Takashi asked him if he had thought that he would run away from them after what they have done. He pushes that trash and lets him know that now it is their time to fall. The orcs lift his body using the wooden spears, and there the most brutal first kill begins. The orcs began to tear his limbs one by one and began to tear his guts apart, all while he was alive. Tears overflowed, and he screamed out to someone for help, but the orcs made sure to make him feel the pain 100 times more. As his screams echoed in the forest, Nori was the remaining rat. Nori asks Takashi if he had killed his classmate, and he replies to him by telling him that they tried to kill him first, and it is only natural that he would retaliate. Now the way he said this was deafening and evil, and Nori began to spew how he is a lowlife and nothing but a pig. He said this while wearing a crown for jokers, and Takashi points to the back and lets him know that there are a few of the guys he did wrong behind him. 2 strong orcs quickly approached him and grabbed his head immediately. As he knew that he has no physical power, that trash began to cry, but it was already too late, and Takashi was about to deliver the most brutal death till now. The orcs exerted so much physical force that his skull began to crush, and they folded him like a metal can. As his eyes go missing and his body's entire existence vanishes, Takashi looks at crawling weasel Ryuk, who just opens his eyes after going unconscious for a few minutes. He looks at Takashi and mocked him for surprising them out of nowhere and arranging everything. He tells him that he isn't a man who fights head-to-head and asks if he is a human. This time, Takashi stomps on that pathetic weasel's head and tells him how he treated him like an insect and points that he has no right to tell him if he is a human or not. He kicks that trash, and as he grunted, Takashi began to kick the living crap out of him. Every kick was filled with undying ruthless rage, and he stomped and stomped on that trash for doing unthinkable things to innocent women, and called it hunting. As the kicks began to hurt more than anything, he shouts from below and shared that everyone was involved in the bullying. He stops and moves his foot over, and that trash began to beg him like a loser. He proposes to Takashi that he would snitch on everyone and share the class dark secret with him. As he began to listen to him, he screams that the entire class was behind setting his house on fire and killing his younger sister. He processes this and asks him again if this is true, and he began to explain how he only said a few things here and there and did nothing else, and spewed how others were the main people who set his house on fire. He instantly remembers his poor sister, begging to be freed, and he screamed. His sister was sick and couldn't move at all, and the entire class set his home on fire not knowing that he was not home. Takashi confronts him, and he begins to share how the class took their turns to do him wrong and shared how everyone in the class was given different roles. He tells him that he was given the role to call the fire department and stage everything as an accident. He started to explain how he wasn't actually the one who planned the rest. That day the cries of his sister were loud and clear, and no one helped her. Remembering the terrible pieces of humans from his class, he knew that demons are sometimes born from a womb. Although this all was true, Ryuk was also planning on getting his jewel, and as he was about to do this, immediately a spear was stabbed in his hand. He jolts and screams from the pain and pleads with Takashi to let him off just once. But he was not there to let him go free, rather, he was about to be killed in cold blood. Since the final moments of humans tend to bring out their real personality, he immediately began to beg him like a lowlife and spewed to him that he would do anything he says. He tells him that he would be a dog for the rest of his life and follow whatever he would tell him to do. He began to lower his head and approached Takashi's shoes and cried to him that he would lick his shoes always. He lowers his head in a disgusting manner and began to tell him that he would even eat and lick the ground just to prove that he is serious. He kept telling him that he is his dog and would do anything, and Takashi tells him in a cold voice to die. He tells him to die like the trash who died earlier. He grabs onto a spear and asks about the stuff he said earlier, and as he glares through his dead and disgusting soul, in the next second, Takashi does the most wonderful job and stabs that spear right in the center. As he gurgled blood, Ryuk died right there with tears overflowing. As he leaves, the orc immediately detaches the head, and there they declare victory over their enemies and shout a loud war scream. Takashi laughs for always thinking that he needed to endure and resist when he could have always pushed back and moved forward. He screams at the oppressors and asks why people don't fight back to them and let them do whatever they want. He remembers the last moment with his sister, and with this, he would be serving the hardest revenge to date. His rage would be felt by the entire class from the top student to the lowest of low. Everyone would feel what he felt, and he would end them in the most miserable way imaginable. This is the start of the revenge.